The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government in what we were tasked to do.
In the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, we have a right to life, we have a right to defend life.
This legislation is centered on meeting the needs of Idaho families.
And we have no way to maintain control over the spending of this program, and it will be a disaster for this state long term.
But we have a whole gamut of kids whose parents would like to do something for them and they cannot.
The courts have long held that our ability to transfer title on real property benefits society as a whole.
This is simply about putting it out of reach of young, innocent, vulnerable children and making our libraries and schools a safe place for them to go.
And I am increasingly frustrated that we cannot stop ourselves from drinking at the public trough.
He's sounding the alarm. He's saying if we don't address these issues, we potentially might have greater problems moving forward.
I feel like we're back to an unappointed board that gets to decide who is essential and who is non-essential.
If I was looking at a business and I was looking at these figures, there would be heads rolling because this is unsustainable.
We're supposed to be bottom-up government. We're supposed to be representing my citizens' ideas and your citizens' ideas, and we're supposed to be discussing them and debating them to come to a conclusion.
And for me, it's about a couple things. It's about food security, it's about national security, and it's about preserving American exceptionalism.
The First Amendment and our freedom of religion, freedom of speech are our first liberties. They are so important. We don't have the rest without them.
They always had all the items in the budget. The difference is that before you would see the budget as a whole. And when you got the education budget, you got to look at everything in it, but you would actually look at the whole education budget and say, okay, these are all the things that are going into the education budget. We're going to hear from the head of the Department of Education. We're going to ask her questions on it. It was actually very transparent. Now, the head of the Department of Education isn't even allowed to come in the room and make her case. She has been barred from it all. She's not part of the question-making process. I think that's an interference with transparency. But right now, we have absolutely no idea. We don't even know what the target revenue is for the state yet. They did this budget in a vacuum. The committee wasn't even involved in these baseline skeleton budgets. It was just done by the chairs. And the budget was passed without any clue as to what the whole is going to look like. So it's kind of like, well, you know, you're going to start painting this wall without really knowing how big the wall is, what the house looks like, what the other things are in the room, what the furniture is, what any other color of any other wall is. So I don't think that's more transparent. I don't think that operating in a total vacuum where you have no insight into how the pieces are going to work together, that feels to me far less transparent. And to just take a leap of faith that when you pass this little itty bitty budget, it's somehow all going to come together in some big whole that works. Before we saw the big hole, and we got to see the big hole and made sure that it worked before we voted on it. That is the opposite of what we're doing now.
Oh, the Democrats in Idaho are just like the Democrats in Washington, D.C. The incredible amount of lies. I'm sorry. I mean, it's unbelievable to think, that the Department of Education, the head of Department of Education has no say in their budgets, has no say. They're not even allowed in the room. Are you kidding me? It's what's the date? Let's start with that. February 12. We got 11 up here. February 12. 2024. Matt Edwards here. Welcome to The Signal. We are live. Last week was incredible if you were paying attention and watching last week's episodes and what was going on in the news here in Idaho. But the budget process, transparency has come no matter what the Democrats say. The Democrats here, what she was talking about, and that was Representative Ilana Rebel from Boise, what she was talking about there is that she basically wants the agency in charge of setting budgets. She wants the agency in charge, just like how it's always been. The agency sends in money, the governor sends in his requests, and then the legislators just pick and choose from those two options what to fund, and they have no say in it. But this is different. It's a new day. The legislature, the people are taking back control of their money. And the good representative there wants to completely throw up smoke screens and deliver information that is completely not true, and telling you that now it's less transparent. We have a clip from Wendy Horman, who was on that same program. That was Idaho Public Television. Wendy Horman was on, and she gave us this info.
This was always intended to be an iterative process where we're going to take certain steps at this stage, and then we'll take additional steps. For example, our JFAC staff did a study and revealed that only about 19% of all the money that we spend in Idaho gets a look during legislative session. That's not okay. We don't have public testimony in JFAC. That's another flaw in our system. So there are additional steps that we will be taking to make sure we're fully taking care of the taxpayers' money. So this summer we'll be looking at that 81%, going systemically through each agency's base budget to find out exactly what's in there. In the meantime, one of the really exciting parts of the changes is our new budget website. You can find that from going to legislature.idaho.gov and clicking on budget information. You can see revenue, you can see spending, you can see federal funds, you can see audit findings, you can see Transparent Idaho. You can see where every dime's going in every state agency. So those are some of the exciting changes as well.
Yes, thank you, Representative Horman. They're the co-chair of the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee. That's JFAC. And I mean, did you hear what she said there? Only 19% of the budget actually gets looked at by folks who are voting for these budgets. And that's after a study that they've done. So that's what the Democrats want. The Democrats and their some of their registered Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle, that's what they want. They want to go back to the time, which was just a few short weeks ago, that where we only pay attention to 19% of the budget, and we let the agencies in charge of their money, in charge of our money. It's a new day. It's a new day. It's a new week, and we are happy to report that all 10 of the maintenance budgets, I believe all 10, were passed last week. And this process is now underway. So the real battle begins in JFAC, where these agencies that are requesting new and additional money will come into JFAC. They'll come into these workshops, and they will make their case as to why they want something like, I don't know, a $6,000 printer. We showed you that clip last week where Senator Bierke was questioning the need for a brand new $6,000 printer for the Public Employees Retirement Service Department. So I wanted to show you these clips because this is what is going out in the quote mainstream media for those who watch the Idaho Public Television broadcasts of their legislative wrap-up, Idaho Reports, whatever it's called. But I wanted to show you these clips in the context of what we're talking about here, because what happened was monumental. It has made waves across the state and across the country. We've seen other people who are paying attention come on and notice that this is happening. Idaho did get a lot of eyeballs on, or Idaho received a lot of. I'm tongue-tied today. Idaho received a lot of eyeballs across the nation today for various reasons, but this is the most important one that we're talking about. So we're going to keep tabs on that. Right now, the House was in session this morning. They've adjourned already for the day. I believe they're adjourned. I don't think they went at ease. We heard Representative Scott yesterday talk about how they went at ease and went to caucus for more hours than she's ever seen in her 10 years in the legislature. But I believe that the House is adjourned. The Senate, however, is currently in session. And they are in the middle of either listening to, let's hear what they're, can we hear it? Can we dip in and hear?
Even today, President Lincoln continues to capture the attention of people, even 160 years after his death. This cannot simply be attributed to how relatable the former president is.
Okay.
Historians are
It is today Lincoln's birthday? Is it February 12th? Is that Lincoln's birthday? Maybe this is why it's it's going on today. Of course, the Republican Party committees have their Lincoln Day dinners. You know, they actually start in January in some places, but they backload them into the entire rest of the year. But the Lincoln Days are starting in your county, so it looked like they had a speaker there talking about Abraham Lincoln. So, but they do have some bills on the agenda today. In the House Bill 417 passed just before they broke for today, and that bill was the where the state of Idaho has to accept cash from citizens for any of their debts to the state. They have to accept cash. So that passed today for all you cashless society warriors in Idaho. You still got to accept cash, so that'll continue. But I know that Senate Bills 1253 and 1232, those will be listened to today. One of those is the child or the device protection, the filters on the devices. That's going to be up for debate today. So if that starts happening in the Senate, the bill that would require smartphone and computers and any device that's going to a child, that the parental filters need to be turned on. So that'll be debated on the floor today, most likely. And so if that happens, maybe we'll dip in and listen to that. Okay, where is my notes for today? And my guys are telling me who is here. All right, we have. We wanted to check in with our good friend at the Gem State Chronicle. Brian Allman has been on the show many times now. It's great to always have him on here because it looks like he's still. I was trying to stall and give him some time to set up and give him a proper introduction. It looks like he's at the Capitol today, but Brian Allman is here. We wanted to get his perspective on what went down last week, and then also today was exciting this morning. I know Brian testified and gave public comment at one of the bill hearings this morning. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But Brian, welcome to the program. What has been your reaction to what happened last week with the budget transparency reform, as well as the ouster of the majority leader on the Republican side?
Hi, Matt. Hope you can hear me. It's a bit echoey in here. Yeah, last week was crazy. I mean, it's been so busy since then. Last week seems like last year. But yeah, they got through the first maintenance budget on the House floor. It was only 38-31. It was very close. A lot of people going against it. But then, they shuffled the caucus around, came back, and they're passing by larger margins now. So it seems like a lot of the people who were maybe in the middle have been whipped into shape, so to speak. And the Senate, of course, passed them on the party line votes. So it seems like the new process has won the day. Senator Groh and Representative Horman, they really went out on a limb to make this happen. And I was at my legislative district meeting last Thursday where Senator Groh, who's my senator, came and shared his perspective of what happened on that day of the coup. He called it the worst day of his life. He had to sit there as all his work was being undone for 3 hours. But he powered through it and continued working. And now here we are, and we've got the maintenance budgets going forward.
Wow, incredible! I mean, the word coup is thrown around a lot these days, but it really must have felt that way when you have been working on something for so long that you think so many people are behind. I was speaking with several other JFAC members, and they really felt betrayed by what happened, and we had a montage of betrayal moments in movies that we played last week to kind of convey what was actually happening, and it really is incredible to see that even though all of that happened, that the conservatives were able to rally around each other, that they were able to get leadership from the speaker in the House side, and then the Senate side saw the writing on the wall and decided to fall in line as well. What do you think the ramifications are going forward when it comes to the budget process specifically? Because we heard that a lot of the Democrats are worried that they won't ever see any other budgets again. But we know that's not true. We know that there needs to be things that need to be addressed. Cost of living, replacement items, that sort of thing. But what do you see going forward are going to be the big fights with the rest of the budgets that are coming in?
Well, I asked Senator Groh at that meeting if there was any truth to this idea that once they pass the maintenance budgets, that the House could just adjourn and not do any of the increases. And he said, no, that's not true. They still need to, take these requests from the governor, from the agencies, debate them in JFAC, send them to the floor. They still have to do that. And if they're rejected on the floor, they'll just go back to JFAC. But what this does is it gives members of the House and the Senate a little more flexibility, because they're not rejecting the entire agency's budget. They're just rejecting, if they so choose, they would just be rejecting the handful of line item increases. And so I think that gives the House and the Senate more flexibility. It gives them more transparency. It also gives JFAC more flexibility, because once they've got the maintenance budgets out of the way, now they can really go down into the nitty gritty of, okay, what are they asking for? Is this really necessary? And spend their time doing that instead of just doing the budget as a whole. So I think it will bring us more transparency, maybe some more fiscal responsibility, fiscal restraint. Maybe we can get that number, which was $14.5 billion last year. Maybe we can get that a little lower.
Yeah, I mean, that is the goal. That's the goal as taxpayers, is for us to keep as much money as possible, but allow the basic functions of government to continue. We opened the show today with a clip from Representative Ilana Rubel, the minority leader for the Democrats in the House. And she was talking about how the agency heads are now no longer a part of the conversation. they're shut out of the room. And while they may have had a seat at the table in JFAC meetings, the notion that they don't have a say is completely ridiculous. I mean, you just pointed out right now that all of these requests are still able to come in the normal channels. Why do you think the Democrats do this so often?
Well, I can't speculate necessarily as to motive, but
You're a nice guy, Brian.
I think there's a big divide. Are you the sort of person who thinks the government's the solution to all our problems, or are you the sort of person who thinks the government's a necessary evil that we need to protect our rights and nothing further? So I think the Democrats, their worldview is that we need more government. We need to give them more money so they can do more things, to do good things for people. And they're very worried that this new process is going to make it more difficult to funnel more taxpayer money, more federal money even, into these agencies that they're kind of on the same page with.
Right. Okay, well, that's the minority side of things. And in the majority, we saw that as we went off the air on Friday, that Assistant Majority Leader Sage Dixon ended up adjourning for the day. He spoke. He was doing some of the majority leader's work today in the House. But do we know if the majority has elected a new majority leader yet? Has that vote happened? Has it been made public yet?
I've been told that has happened. This morning, Representative Dixon was still running the floor as Assistant Majority Leader. However, my sources say that Representative Jason Monks has been elected, and they just haven't officially announced it yet. So.
Interesting. Okay, breaking news there.
Yeah. Well, that's over the weekend. I was hearing that as the most likely rumor, and now I've been told this morning that is a done deal. So we should hear something very soon.
Okay. So that's okay. Very good. All right. Well, you heard it here. Representative Jason Monks is may be assuming the role of majority leader. I know he was in talks last session when former Speaker of the House Scott Bedke was elected to Lieutenant Governor, and we needed a new speaker. That Representative Monks and Representative Moyle seem to have been the top two considerations. So this makes sense. Representative Monks, District 22, I think 22. Yeah, District 22, Meridian. Looks like he will. According to Brian here and his sources, will assume the role of majority leader. That's pretty good news there. He's a pretty conservative guy. He's got a pretty good track record, and I've seen him run his committees. He's pretty fair, and this will be interesting. Okay, more analysis on that to come. Thank you, Brian. with that being said, let's take a short break because I want to get back to Brian was testifying this morning in one of the committee hearings. So we'll take a quick break and we'll come back and reset with Brian here. Stick around.
Surplus, which is not a surplus, it's an overcharging of the taxpayers.
There's a saying in Idaho, Esto perpetua. It is forever. But the truth is, nothing lasts forever. Not without a fight. The Gem State is ours to fight for. It is ours to win. For life and liberty. For honesty and integrity. We ride together.
Okay, we are back with Brian Ullman, the Gem State Chronicle, and this morning in the Senate State Affairs Committee, Senate Bill 1289 was before the committee. This was also the time for the public to give their comment. This bill has been known as the library bill. This seeks to restrict minors' access to graphic materials that may or may not be in the library. That seems to be a big question of whether these books even exist. But nevertheless, this bill is here. It was brought before the committees by Representative Jaron Crane, and then it was summarily taken back by the committee as it made its way to the floor to be rewritten and reworked with Senator Jeff Schroeder, who presented it today. Brian, you were there giving public comment. I believe we have, guys, do we have a thumbs up? Do we have a clip of Brian this morning? Should we play that? We got it. Yeah, let's listen to your testimony this morning, Brian.
Members of the committee, my name is Brian Ullman. I am a member of the Eagle Public Library Board of Trustees, though I am here speaking on my own behalf. And I want to ask, what if libraries and school libraries gave out cigarettes and alcohol to minors? That would be absurd. Nobody would support that. We've decided as a society that those things are not for children, and we've defined the age at which children can become adults and handle those things. Yet there are some things that children can see on their library shelves that I think are just as harmful. And our current statute recognizes that, but it carved out the libraries and schools. The materials that have driven this controversy are not biology textbooks, not about classical art. They're clearly obscene. There's been many examples brought before the committees over the last few years. This really is about a fraction of a percent of the books that library staff curates. And as a reminder, they do curate. They choose what goes on the shelves. No library can handle every single book that's ever been made, so they have to make decisions. I think this bill is a good start, a way to ensure that the most heinous examples of these materials are kept out of minors' hands. I know many people in my community, the conservative side, are frustrated that the bill doesn't go far enough, that it doesn't provide a stronger method of removing these books. Obviously, there are many on the other side who believes it goes too far, and that any obstacle to children accessing materials is too far. I don't believe this is about a First Amendment issue. I believe it's just about protecting children. I think this bill creates a reasonable process that allows patrons of a school or library to bring materials to a committee made up of their community members. If it's possible that the committee is stacked with people who agree with the existing board, at least it will be out in the open in a public hearing. They'll have to justify why they believe this book does not fall under those harmful to minor statutes. I've long believed that a community committee is a good idea. At a meeting last month, our library director out in Eagle also suggested that idea. It was unprompted. He came to the same conclusion. Eagle already has a request for reconsideration, and so I believe this strengthens what we're already doing. So I believe this bill is a good compromise between enforcing our basic statutory standards for what's harmful to minors and retaining community control over everything else. And so I urge the committee to pass this, send it to the floor with a do-pass recommendation.
Thank you for your testimony this morning. I don't see any questions.
Okay. Brian, were you in the room when they decided on whether or not they should send this bill along? What's the latest on this bill's journey?
So yes, I was there, and if you go to my Twitter account at GemStateBrian, you'll see I was live tweeting, except for when I was up there testifying. It's an interesting bill because it's very divisive in that, or I guess divisive is the wrong word, because there were people on the right who were testifying against this bill because it didn't go far enough. Ron Nate of the Idaho Freedom Foundation testified against it. The Idaho Family Policy Center testified urging them to amend it and make it stronger. And meanwhile, of course, the usual suspects, the librarians and the library staff and the teachers, were coming out against it because they don't like anything that says that they can't give whatever they want to children. In the end, it passed 6-3 out of committee. And the 3 no's were the 2 Democrats, Senators Wintrow and Ruchte, as well as Senator Ben Taves, who's one of the more socially conservative members of the Senate. He was concerned that the bill didn't go far enough. And what I'm hearing from my conservative friends is that they're worried that if this passes, then they'll wipe their hands of it, call it good, and won't do anything stronger. However, as you heard from my testimony, I think it is a good and reasonable compromise. I think this will give members of communities, patrons of libraries and schools, a tool that they can use. And they're not going to get everything out that they want. But it will at least bring it into the open, into public debate, what is actually appropriate for children.
So can you give us a little bit of insight onto what the main difference is between the original bill, which was sold as the best bill in the nation? I believe that, I may be paraphrasing, but that's how it was conveyed, the best bill in the nation when it comes to this issue. What is it a better bill now? What I mean, it sounds like if certain people are a little disappointed in it, and the library and some of the library people are still against it, that it may not. Where is it at? What do you know? Do you know the main difference here?
Mm-hmm. So I just want to mention that the Idaho Library Association also testified, and they are neutral, which can be a red flag if you're on the right. But they're not for it or against it. So Representative Jaron Crane's original bill would mean you fill out a form if you believe a book should not be in the library or in the children's section, and then the library has 30 days to consider that. And they can either then move the book or they can reject the request. If they reject the request, then you have a civil cause of action. You can essentially sue the library and say, hey, this book is violating this existing statute against harmful materials to minors. And then the judge would come down one way or another, with the maximum fine being $250 for the library plus attorney's fees, which, as people point out, could be a lot. At the same time as Representative Crane's bill coming in, Senator Schroeder introduced a different bill that would create a committee to evaluate reconsideration requests at school libraries. So what this does is it basically combines the two. It creates a universal form that all the different libraries and school libraries will have to have available for reconsideration, and a patron of that library, so a parent of a child of the school or a parent of a child who has a library card at a local library, fills it out and says, okay, this book violates the statute because of this. So it's very specific. And then the school board or the library board of trustees would have the opportunity, or needs to have preemptively created a committee of people, at least 3 people, one of which who has to be a parent of a minor child in that jurisdiction. And that committee will then hear that, and it will be an open meeting. Senator Schroeder compared it to a planning and zoning meeting where you have, where you have the person who submitted the form comes in and explains their case, and then you have the library, if they disagree, explains their case, and then that committee decides. If the committee doesn't decide according to what the requester wants, then they can go up a level to the board, and then there's judicial review after that. The cause of action only comes into place if the committee decides that, yeah, this book violates the statute about being harmful to minors, but it's still on the shelves. So if the committee says, yeah, we think this book totally, shows graphic sex, and it shouldn't be in the children's section, and then the person comes back a few days later and finds that the librarians have put it back in the children's section, then that's where the civil action comes into play. So again, according to who you ask, it's either still too punitive, or it doesn't go far enough.
Right. Well, fantastic breakdown there, Brian. I appreciate that. Okay, folks. Well, that's the bill where it is. So it's Senate Bill 1289. It's making its way out of committee onto the Senate floor. We'll hear more debate on this. And I guess if you want to read up about it, you got to go to the legislative website and look up Senate Bill 1289, and contact your senators now and figure out exactly where they stand and what you think should happen with this bill. Brian, I appreciate you breaking all of this stuff down. I want to make sure everybody knows where they can find you, where they can keep in touch with you, because you're doing great work out there.
Thanks, Matt. And I appreciate you having this program on every day, bringing people, into the process, because that's so important. You can find me at GemStateBrian on Twitter, or X, whatever it's called now. GemStateChronicle.com and GemState.substack.com if you want to subscribe. Everything that was at the Substack is republished at the Chronicle. There you can see on the left-hand column, but I'm also republishing guest editorials and keeping up on bills. I need to catch up on that today. And, you see on the right, you see all my appearances on Idaho Signal. Whenever there's a video that I'm involved with, I try to post it there as well.
Fantastic. We appreciate that. And for all the work you're doing down there, Brian, we thank you so much. All right. We will check in with Brian maybe later this week too and see what else is going on. It's going to be a busy week, I imagine. Brian, have a great one.
Thank you. You too.
All right. All right, folks. We've got a lot to get to, so we'll take a short break and be right back.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government and what we were tasked to do.
All Idaho lawmakers swear an oath to support the Idaho and U.S. constitutions. But how's that working out for you? Because not all Idaho lawmakers share the same values. That's where the Citizens Alliance of Idaho Pledge comes in. 10 statements inspired by those two founding documents that are designed to preserve our shared values. Values such as education freedom, safeguarding free speech, defending our protected right to self-defense, and being responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. When a lawmaker signs the pledge, they are performing an act of political courage, accepting the challenge to be a champion for our values, and serving with political integrity. To find out if your lawmaker signed the pledge, visit idahopledge.com. Paid for by Citizens Alliance of Idaho. We ride together.
Okay, welcome back. We, the guys here and I they're joking about having a breaking news graphic that flies in like it's a Fox News alert or something, but we don't have that. I don't know if we will do that kind of thing, but we had a little bit of breaking news. I mean, I didn't see it anywhere else. There it is. Representative Jason Monks out of 22 is the new House Majority Leader. So we'll see if that sticks. He was not running the floor today. It was still Assistant Majority Leader Sage Dixon out of District 1, a pledge signer in good standing himself. But Representative Monks here, that seems to be the breaking news. So congratulations to him, and I'm sure we'll see we'll see how that plays out, the ramifications of that. Sometimes there's things that go on behind the scenes that you don't know. We see some of the ramifications of, but we don't know why it's happening. And so if things start to move a little bit differently, if things start to get prioritized a little bit differently, this might be one of the reasons why that's happening. I mean, we're seeing that with the new speaker, who's in his second session as the Speaker of the House, Representative Mike Moyle, Speaker Moyle. We've seen the ramifications of having him as the Speaker, as this new budget process, at least on the House side, was helped through. Okay, last week. Senator Scott Herndon was before the I forget which committee it was, but I think it was the State Affairs Committee. We'll see here in a second because we're gonna play this clip in full. We had Senator Scott Herndon on, I believe, in one of our first, if not the first episode that we did here on the Signal. We also had Greg Pruitt from the Second Amendment, the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance, discussing this bill. This is Senate Bill 1310, and this bill will seek to close a loophole, if you will, in the law that would allow a public space that normally your constitutional rights would be protected no matter what. And specifically here, we're talking about the Second Amendment. We're also talking about Article 1, Section 11 of the Idaho Constitution Declaration of Rights. But essentially what occurred is that there was an event being held, a farmer's market type event being held in Sandpoint on public property. And some folks were walking through carrying firearms, and they were told that they could not do that, even though it was public property that was advertised with an event going on that was advertised as being open to the public. There was no fee to walk through or any of that. So So it went all the way up to the Supreme Court because that was challenged, and the Supreme Court said, hey, that can happen. There's nothing in the law that says that can't happen, that you can't restrict someone's Second Amendment rights because they're walking through a private event on public property. So Senator Scott Herndon presented this bill that seeks to close that loophole. We're going to play this clip in full because there's a few exchanges back and forth here, and I want you to make sure you know where it's at, because this is a very this bill could have ramifications going forward on a number of different things, which we've spoken about on this program already. But we'll catch you up to speed on that. So let's watch this clip here. This is Senator Scott Herndon.
Honor and boundary counties. RS 31187 is affecting our section 183302, which is our section that contains your right to carry a firearm in the state of Idaho, besides our constitutional provisions. And in the RS, that section is a pretty long section. There's technical changes on page 2 at lines 20 and 21. And then the remainder of the change is actually the last page in the RS. And it concerns a new subsection 26. So I'll give you a little bit of background. Under subsection 25, which is also on page 8 at the top of the page there, we've recently had an Idaho Supreme Court decision that would state that anything when a private group rents private property, so let's take a public park as an example. Right now, firearms are not prohibited in that public park, so you could carry your firearm there. And if a private group gets a permit, has a contract, has a lease, anything of that nature, the Supreme Court says that under subsection 25, that ground for the duration of that event, it doesn't matter how long or how short that event is, how long or how short the contract is, that is private property for the duration of that event. Well, that's going to create some possibilities under that very recent Supreme Court decision that groups who would not otherwise have done it, maybe could prohibit firearms during their events that are free and open to the public, and that the public, to a reasonable person, wouldn't be able to discern that this is a restricted event. So that's the reason for the new subsection 26, is just to maintain what we already have enjoyed for decades in Idaho, and your right to carry. What subsection 26 would do is when these private groups rent, contract, or get a permit to have an event on public ground that you otherwise would be able to carry a firearm, then for the duration of that use for that event, as long as the event is open, free, and unrestricted to the public, you have a right to carry a firearm there. That means that if the event is restricted and doesn't allow every person to go into that event, or charges a fee, so it's clear that it's a restricted event, then that will be considered private ground, as it should be under subsection 25, and you would not necessarily be able to carry your firearm there. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Burnt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Herndon, good to see you this morning. Walk me through an example of what that would look like that your bill would support.
Senator Herndon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Burnt. So a good example, I'll give you 2 examples. So at the festival in Sandpoint, which is held at a public park, it is a restricted access. They charge a ticket fee to come in to watch a concert. On any normal day, you would be able to walk into that public park with your firearm. But when they have the festival, so they're holding that concert and they restrict access and they decide they don't want your firearm there, you would not be able to carry your firearm there. So it would not change that situation. Now let's go to the same city. At Farm and Park downtown, there's a private farmers market group that holds a farmers market in Farm and Park. There's clear bounds of the park, but it's not discernible that there's any entry. It's free, unrestricted access to the public. And if the private farmers market group got the idea that they wanted to prohibit firearms there, this legislation would prohibit them from making that restriction on what would otherwise appear to be completely free and open to the public.
Senator Ruckty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, so if that same farmer's market decided they wanted to just like charge a can of food that they could turn over to, whoever's taking cans of food, the local pantry, that would then mean that they had restricted access. In other words, charge something.
Senator Herndon.
Chairman, Senator Ruckty, I would say it would come down to this. If the can of food was a requirement, and if you didn't bring your can of food and then you could otherwise not enter, that would be a free and otherwise not free, and that would be a restricted access. So if that farmer's market then said you can't carry a firearm there, so there's very clearly some people that can get in and some people that can't, then you would not be able to carry your firearm in that situation.
Don't see any other discussion. Senator Winder?
Just a quick question. If someone had the park, as you gave an example, would they be required to put a fence around the park for their event in order to have restricted access? Or help me understand that a little bit more. We talked about it a little bit when you were in my office, but help me understand it.
Senator Herndon?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Winder, the answer would be if there was any restriction of any type, if it was clear that not everybody's allowed in, it wouldn't require a fence. So if there's just some method that they're clearly prohibiting access, a good example would be, let's say, a wedding. So it's a private event, but it could be held at the pavilion at a public park. And they probably don't want everybody in their wedding setting. So my guess would be most people would perceive that that's a restricted access. And certainly if some Joe member of the public came in and sat down with his gun, they would be able to ask him to leave. That's a restricted situation.
Don't see any other questions. Committee, what's your wishes on the RS? Senator Taves.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we introduce RS 31187.
Motion by Senator Taves, second by Senator Harris, that RS 31187 be sent to print. Discussion on the motion? Don't see any of those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Senator. Next, we're going to invite.
Okay, so that was that RS. It now has a bill number. It's Senate Bill 1310. Fascinating discussion there, especially when it came to whether or not the access to the public spaces is restricted. The wedding example was interesting because I don't think people are charging tickets or a can of food to enter a wedding. However, it is, quote, a private event. So that more challenges to this law being passed coming down. But I also want to show you how this process works when it comes to amending existing statute. So this is a bill that has 8 pages. And the reason it's 8 pages is because this particular statute, which I thought I had written down here, 13. So in the Idaho statute, it's section 18-13302. That's not important unless you want to look it up. 18-13302. And when you look up the statute, it's going to be 8 pages long. And so what Senator Herndon was doing here was essentially amending the statute to include new language. And whenever you include new language, you basically write out the new language that you want inserted into the bill, and then you submit the entire bill, that entire statute, 8 pages worth, but you underline the new section. And so here is the new section that is being added to the existing law of carrying firearms in public. And so if you look at this language here, which I have somewhere because I printed it out. Here we go. It states, unless otherwise prohibited in this chapter, nothing in this section shall be construed to limit the right to keep and bear arms on any property owned by the state of Idaho or its political subdivisions that is leased, rented, licensed, loaned, permitted, or occupied, whether for consideration or not, to any private entity or person, if such private entity or person exclusively and continuously possesses and enjoys the use of such property for an event that would appear to be a reasonable person to be open to the general public with free, unrestricted access, nothing in this subsection relieves any political subdivision of its duties to convey or manage public property in accordance with Idaho law. If the event that is going on, and this is the part here, appears to a reasonable person to be an open, public, free event with unrestricted access, then you cannot restrict Second Amendment rights. And the reason I believe that this law here, this new section here, will have ramifications is because should this pass, should this become part of our statute, then you wouldn't be able to restrict other areas of our constitutional rights, our constitutional guarantees, such as the First Amendment and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. So I believe this is a fantastic bill. It addresses a very important issue when it comes to public property, especially for events that are typically opened to the public but being run by a private organization because they have the ability to lease and rent and put on a farmer's market or a music festival or something that is generally good for the community. So this is the process. This is how we get it done. They challenged the law a couple of years ago. It went all the way through the court system to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, yes, they do have a right to do this. And so Senator Herndon, in his position as senator, said, well, we're going to write law that says you can't do that. So that's the process, and it's fascinating. And we thank Senator Herndon. We thank the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance and Greg Pruitt over there for standing with the Second Amendment, for standing with our constitutional rights, and going through the process to get to this. This is how it's done. This is why elections are so important, and we need to stay on it. So kudos to Senator Scott Herndon from District 1 up in Bonner and Boundary County. Okay. Let's go to last week. We had we had a lot of things on deck last week, and we didn't get to it. And one of those things that we did was we had an interview with a commissioner from Bonner County. Nice segue there. And we wanted to interview a commissioner there from Bonner County because a clip went viral that had a constituent in Bonner County address at a public hearing, the commissioner, the county commissioners there, with some complaints. So we're going to play this clip. It's rather amusing, but watch as one of the commissioners stands up for constitutional rights and free speech. So let's watch this clip.
President Bowman, for the record. So at the last business meeting, our freedom of speech was cut off by you, Chairman Ahmet. And I just wanted to bring that truth out. It's just truth. It's not a derogatory thing. It's just something that happened. And our freedom of speech is being constantly chipped away and attacked and restricted by you. This is just fact. Every single week there's a new little speech or something about how, you're the chairman and we're going to do it your way and all this stuff. But I'm going to bring in Samuel Adams here because I think he was a wonderful founding father. And he said, very few have fortitude enough to tell a tyrant that they are determined to be free. I am determined to be free, and I do have the fortitude, and I know there are very many with me on that. So one of the things that I want you to know is that even though it is very few that stand up at these meetings, our founding fathers still got it done, and that's why we have a free country right now, or it's kind of semi-free. We have folks like you that manipulate and maneuver. No, you're going to let me speak. No, stop. I said a word, and it's okay. It's okay. Just
Mrs.
calm
Bowman.
down. Okay, so I'm going to finish.
And
Mrs.
Bowman,
no,
that is your warning,
no.
and if you do so again, I will ask you to take your seat.
What did I do? What did I do?
To say manipulate following that?
Okay, did you not manipulate? Have you not done that? You have done that. I'm speaking truth. The truth does hurt. It also sets us free. Okay? So one of the things that I want to talk about as far as freedom of speech, again, it is not our Constitution that gives us freedom of speech. It guarantees it. What gives us freedom is God and God's law, okay? God is what gives us freedom. It's not the Constitution. And so when you disrespect our freedom to speak, first of all, you disrespect all of the people that fought and died to protect that. That's the first thing you disrespect. The second thing you disrespect is God's law. And I can tell you right now, God's law is going to come snapping back to you like a gigantic rubber band, and it's not going to be fun for you. So you can pound your gavel and you can shut off public comment. You can do all of these things, but God's law is going to come back and snap you, okay? And I'm just warning you of that. It isn't something that we, the people, have to do. It's something that will be done. And you will reap what you sow. You will both reap what you sow.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowman. Mr. Dan Welly, and just a comment for you, Mrs. Bowman. In my 23 years in uniform, I didn't see either of you. I never saw you by my right or left.
I'm sorry, but what has to not happen in this...
No, you weren't, Mr. Rose.
What has to happen is the community giving us comments that we may not like to hear. And I will tell you, I sat through you letting a whole train wreck of people come and say actual things that weren't honest. And you use this statement of, legal told me that you have to accept that because you're elected. When someone uses a word that you don't like, you're interrupting their time and intentionally not giving them back their time on the clock. That's not appropriate. And then you literally in this meeting, and this will be the second meeting in a row where you have gone after a member of the public. So use what you used against me when I sat here and heard it all. You don't have a right to say that to her. You're an elected official. And so this is 2024, so change it. You don't like what she said. So maybe you schedule a meeting with her and ask her, how do you change that perception that she has of the work you're doing? Not that you attack her, because I'll tell you, not everybody served in the military, but there's a lot of people that serve our country in other ways. And so to go after people in this meeting because you have a gavel and a microphone is not appropriate for this setting. I don't care what the paper says. I don't care what rule you're going to say. What you just did wasn't fair to her as you interrupted her for using an adjective you didn't agree with. So act the way that you want people to act, and it works out on its own. But what you just did is not appropriate to Mrs. Bowman. And I don't need a comment from you about it.
Wow, folks. That is an elected official standing up for you, standing up for the First Amendment. Incredible. And calling out her colleagues on the board. I had the distinct pleasure of talking with Commissioner Aisha Williams of Bonner County about this incident and about her role on the commissioner. We have that interview. I want to set it up for you here. And then we'll wrap it up right after. But we're going to go into a little bit of overtime today. The Super Bowl went into overtime yesterday. We're getting a little bit of overtime today. So let's watch this interview with Commissioner Aisha Williams. Please enjoy. Okay, it is my pleasure to bring on Bonner County Commissioner Aisha Williams. Aisha, welcome to the program. We just watched a clip of you defending free speech, the First Amendment rights of constituents who are speaking at your meeting. Not to dive into the specifics of what was going on at that particular meeting, because it sounds like that this might just be a common occurrence at boards across the state and the country. But to see an elected official stand up for the First Amendment like this was unfortunately pretty rare. So I wanted to have you on to kind of discuss your mindset and what you've been encountering during your time in this position. So welcome to the program.
Thank you. It has been a significant battle for free speech across our country, not just here in Bonner County. And one of the things that our residents is involved. And that's one of the things that I ran on as commissioner, is to involve the community in local government. With that, we have a lot of people that come, they listen, they hear what's happening in local government, and they want to participate. And it doesn't mean we like what everybody has to say. And I always say that free speech is not to protect that which we want to hear. It's actually for what we don't want to hear, because that's where we really need that right. And our community has stepped up to the plate and taken their rightful position in front of elected officials. We often look to elections and look at the presidency as the most important function in our country. But in my opinion, it is actually local government. What we do in local government impacts you every single day, almost instantly. In Idaho, we don't give up our sovereignty for those that we elect to run our government. And the way we can maintain free speech is by participating meaningfully in our local government. And that is what I ran on, and that's what I stand for, is my voice, your voice. Our residents of Bonner County, state of Idaho, and across the country need to join the fight for free speech. This is one of the last vestiges, it feels like, in our county and in our country. It's not just specific. You'll see that if you go on Twitter and various social media, people across this country are tuning in to what's happening at Bonner County. This is a fight for what is in our Constitution, and it shouldn't be that there's only one and it's new. It should be that this person isn't, and that's what we need to report on. And that is very frightening to know that statistic, because we agree over here in Bonner County that the way in which our country has gone, it's to silence the people and remove them from their rightful position in front of elected officials. I am a leader, but I am not your leader. I am a representative, and my job is to represent, and I cannot represent you appropriately if I don't listen to you, if I don't hear what you have to say, which has nothing to do with whether I agree with it or not. And that's what we need to start demanding for people that take these elected positions.
Wow, well put. What a treat! What a blessing that you are in the position you are up there in Bonner County. I'm also happy to say up there in Bonner County. I'm in Kootenai County, and so there's only two more counties north of us here, but North Idaho strong for sure. So when it comes to your relationship with your fellow commissioners, there's two other commissioners on your board. When it comes to that relationship, what do you think? And I don't want you to get into their mindset, but how has it been? Working alongside folks who seem to be in opposition to your opinion on this matter.
I think it makes it more visible to the community, and even for people like you to see, because you see the difference of what does it mean to represent someone, and it makes people start questioning, am I really being represented by government? And so I don't like that it's so uncomfortable on that board with people that are so anti-public, anti-free speech. But in some ways, we learn our best lessons through things like what's happening in Bonner County. And what I can say positively, although I walk in the county building and it is a tough building to walk into, but when you look out at the landscape of the people that are looking at Bonner County and the fight for the right to be present and to be heard, that is very heartwarming. And it's actually the direction our country needs to take back. What I try to always tell people, it's, we come and go, but if the fabric of our county doesn't maintain with a people that expect free speech, that they expect to be able to participate, we have lost way more than we'll ever recover. Once we lose that freedom, it's not going to get returned. When you look at national, laws, and you look at other countries, they don't value free speech the way we value free speech. In fact, you're seeing a movement towards people trying to say, if you say this, it's a hate crime. That is a slippery slope to go on. And so what it is, it's just pulling the fabric of free speech out. I have to listen to people say all kinds of things I don't like, and I have to make decisions. But what I will never do is say you don't have the right to stand up and say something that I don't want to hear. That is not free speech, and we cannot afford to lose it, because once we lose it, we will never receive that right back.
Amen. Amen. Okay, well, one final question here, because when people do show up to these meetings, and we've seen, very varying degrees of ideology and opinions that come up at different boards. The school board, the West Bonner School District, had its own controversy a few months back over the summer and such. But when people do speak up and speak out, are you finding that there is a double standard in the way some elected officials are treating those, or do you think that they're being consistent?
There is no consistency. I actually, let me change it. There's consistency in that it is favoritism of what side you're speaking on. So I guess it is consistent. And I think that's also something that it's causing the division within the community. I do what's called commissioner chats in the morning, where I bring in someone that's critical to our infrastructure as a county, whether that be our prosecuting attorney, who was my guest yesterday. But if you look at that meeting, that's a fantastic meeting. And it is filled with people from both sides, the people that say I don't like Asia, people that say I do like Asia, but they all come together to get that information. It is very difficult to sit, in my position where I'm like, I literally saw you post that commissioner chats aren't good on Facebook, but yet you're at my chat to ask a question. So it is valuable. I think that we have to start, I don't care what your politics are. It has to do with following the guidelines that we set forth. And for Idaho specifically, I'm sure you've heard that a lot of people feel like we're the last stronghold of freedom and following the Constitution. And as we come into an election year, we need to hold people accountable for that fabric, because the senators and representatives, they're away from you. You can come and see me every single day, all day. And so you need to make sure that I'm doing what you expect me to do. And in part, it doesn't matter what side you're on. And I said this yesterday in yesterday's meeting. We had an unfortunate event where the two commissioners wanted to civilly arrest a citizen. And I spoke out against it. And I specifically said, it doesn't matter what side you're on. You don't want this happening. It doesn't matter. We need to stop drawing the lines. And in a lot of Idaho, for drawing the line in our own party, you don't really need liberals and Democrats to deconstruct us. We're exploding from the inside out. But when you're sitting in a meeting and I'm telling you someone is being arrested and nobody told you why, everyone should be screaming, nope, so that I can make an informed and educated decision. We shouldn't be making a decision, well, they're on the other side, so I don't care. Because that's how politics and politicians strip us of our rights, is they cause that division and they get people to support something. And we have to start doing our job of holding people accountable regardless of their political positions.
All right. Once again, well put. Thank you so much for joining us, Commissioner Williams. I wish you the best of luck up there, and I thank you so much for not only defending in your position, defending the First Amendment, but for running in the first place. I mean, it really inspires folks to get up who believe in the same things you do and get involved. So I thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope we can check back in under some better circumstances. But we know you're fighting the good fight. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys reaching out.
Okay, great. All right, we'll be back right after this.
Spending this money surplus, which is not a surplus, it's an overcharging of the taxpayers.
All right, thanks again to Commissioner Williams for that interview last week. We were really thrilled to give it back to you folks out there. We are over our time. It has been a good day. We will be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and be sure to share the episode, idahosignal.com. Take care. Bye.
This bill, I think, it puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.